everyone, and welcome back to my channel. You guessed it, 2024 book wrap-up is coming to you right now. It's every book I've read in 2023. I'm so excited to share with you the books I read this year. It was a really good year for reading, except for the end of my senior year because we were doing so much testing and exams and stuff, but summer went crazy. I think that's about it, so let's just get right into it. This video is coming to you with a little twist because I'm going to be doing these reviews in 5 words or less. I am going to be explaining the books, but then I'm going to be doing my 5 words or less, so you'll see. So in January, the first book I read was Sorcery of Thorns. Thorns. Why do I keep saying Thorns? Was Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. It is a standalone fantasy romance novel with some mystery in it because basically you're following the main character Elizabeth, who's trying to prove that a crime that she allegedly committed she did not commit. The world building I found very interesting, basically because the books in this world can be used for good and evil and can be transformed into monsters, which I thought was really interesting and cool. Basically I thought this was a really good standalone that I think was a really easy, quick read and I would recommend. My 5 words or less are Nathaniel, cool, standalone, younger, magic. Okay, the next book do I have it? Hold on. The next book I read was for my IB literature class my senior year. It's The Awakening by Kate Chopin. Honestly, this was not my favorite book. It reminded me a little bit too much of Madame Bovary, which I honestly just really did not like, except I liked The Awakening a lot better, and that's probably because it was written by a woman. I thought it was a bit more accurate portrayal, and I just really felt more emotionally attached to it. It's all about Edna Pontellier, who is this young woman and her journey towards self-discovery as a woman who has many limitations during the time, which is the late 19th century. So I related to her quite a bit, and honestly she is a queen. She is a queen, don't get me wrong, but just I struggle a bit with books that just talk about daily life. My 5 words are womanhood, symbolism, she's just a girl, sad but also joyous. So February was also another book that I do not have because it was for my IB English literature class. It is Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. This is, first off, set in South Florida, which is where I'm from, so that was cool. I was like, ooh. It follows the journey of Jeannie Crawford and her multiple marriages. I think the best way to describe this book is that it, like The Awakening, tells the story of women's self-discovery. It was beautiful. I enjoyed it a lot more than The Awakening. I could not tell you why. I think I just liked the storytelling more, probably. Or beautiful. Empowering. Tea cake. Short. Recommended. Sadly, that is all I read in February. Guys, you know senior year, it's gonna be so busy, so let's just go ahead and get right into March. Okay, so March was another book I had to read for my IB English literature class. Guys, I know it's a lot, but this was The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, and oh my gosh. Like the other 2 books, is about women and their search to find themselves in a society which places insane limitations and regulations on them. It was the first time I read speculative fiction, which means that everything that you read in the book has happened somewhere in the world at some point, which was just so crazy and impactful to think about. And it was honestly just a really great book. It was scary, it was suspenseful, it was really great writing, profound, terrifying, interesting, recommended, and suspense. Let's get right into April. Okay, April was an exciting month. I reread Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson, which you guys already know. I read it last year, but I had to reread it because I then went on to read the second one. There's so much world building and plot that happens that I had to reread it. I knew what happened, but did I know what happened? Cassie and Jace are literally my favorite fantasy couple, and this is one of my favorite books ever. If you want to hear more, go back to my other video where I reviewed it, but I will always recommend this book. It is literally one of my favorites. So my 5 words are recommended, in all caps, romance, fights, knives, and daggers, which is counting as 1 word, world building, badass, everything. So sadly, we were interrupted by my IB literature class again, and I read The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. It's one of the greatest novels ever written. I thought it was mid. He stole a lot of ideas from his wife, so I don't know how I feel about that. Mid, overhyped, not recommended, roaring 20s, and depression. Okay, next one, Vow of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. Look at how beautiful she is, guys. I can't, I'm so sorry. She's gorgeous. It was maybe not as good as the first one, but Jesus Christ, it's so incredibly amazing. It's everything I ever wanted. You go even deeper into Cassie's world and like the Ballinger kingdom, and you just learn so much. I love some good fantasy politics and romance, and this had all of that times 1,000. The banter was absolutely just even better. Although the first one, it's just, I feel like I don't hear about these books enough. They're so good. Read it. Banter, drama, captivating, fights, knives, and daggers. You heard it here, folks. You need to read these right now. I'm gonna go right ahead and say that May was IB testing, so it was a lot. So that's why I read nothing during May. So I apologize. Peace and love to everybody out there. Mwah. June. I need to check what time it is. I have a job interview in 30 minutes. The Sun and the Star by Mike Oshiro and Riordan. It's a spin-off novel about Nico and Will's relationship and this adventure that they go on into Tartarus to save Bob the Giant, who we know from the Heroes of Olympus series. Read the Heroes of Olympus series. I mean, I would just tell anybody to read the Heroes of Olympus series anyways, because it's like amazing. It started out for me being a little childish. I knew what I was getting into because it is like, Riordan has been known for writing books for middle schoolers, and then OMG, it gets really dark to the point that I was like, it tore me to shreds, and I did in fact cry. I do recommend every single book in the Percy Jackson universe always. I am jealous of yet another book couple: romance, adventure, tears, and Cocoa Puffs. Okay, so the next book I read was Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. I have literally waited over a year for this to come out in freaking paperback because I didn't want to spend so much money on the hardback when I had the paperback of King of Scars. It's not really what I expected, this book. I know that we learn a lot more about like the gods and not the gods, like the saints in King of Scars, but you just like go crazy in this book about like all the saints and the stuff that's happening. Zoya and Genya are still my favorite. I love Nina's story in this like a lot. It took a lot for me to get used to it just because I'm still caught up on the Nina that we know from Six of Crows, but she is like a different lady in this, and in a good way. Like she needed to be. It was some great character development for her. I thought that there was a death in this book that was extremely unnecessary and honestly ruined like the entire book for me. Overall, I think you should read it if you like Leigh Bardugo's stuff. My 5 words are fantasy, duology, heartbreak, confusion, and cool. Here is where it starts to get crazy. I decided that this summer I was going to read the entire Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. So we start off with the first book, Throne of Glass. I thought that this was one of the best fantasy books I've ever read. I don't know why acotar is more popular. Actually, I do, but the reason is just kind of sad and disappointing. This is absolutely one of the best fantasy series I've ever read. So in this book, Selena is an assassin who is picked up by the Prince of Ardalarn and Dorian and Kale. And she's put in like this tournament to become the king's champion, and it means her freedom. Wow, it took me a really long time to like Kale, but I liked him by the end of the series. The character I got the angriest at was Aiden, who's her cousin, who you don't meet for another bunch of books. The plot twists are actually insane and so enjoyable. The world building is some of the craziest world building I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, I thought that the world building in like Leigh Bardugo stuff and Dance of Thieves was crazy. This is crazier. It was just such incredible storytelling too. Assassins, princes, knights, fights, and magic ... The Crown of Midnight, which was just even better. Not as memorable, but I remember really liking it. Knives, daggers, swords. Oh, that's one word. Knives, daggers, swords. Nehemia, libraries, magic, and hell yeah. The next one was Air of Fire. This one was good. I remember this one being like, I was like, wow. In all caps, magic, fae, witches, princess, and growth. And heavy on the fae. Don't judge me. If you're watching this video, you can't be judging me for that. Now we're into July, The Assassin's Blade. This is a novella. I read this 4th in line because I chose to read it so that plot-wise, it's spoiler-free, and I didn't want any spoilers. This novel occurs a year before the first novel. I really recommend reading it at this time. You can't skip it. You can't just outright skip it at all. And it works really well here, so you don't get any spoilers. Next is Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. Literally the best. Like, this one was incredible. This is where all like starts to go down. I literally can't say anything about it without spoilers, but I will say my 5 words. Elite is my favorite character. Larkin. Manon and the 13, breathtaking, phenomenal. That's me telling you to read it. Then we hit August. So I read Tower of Dawn and Empire of Storm. Why am I saying these at the same time? Because I did the tandem read, and honestly, I don't think there's any other way to do it. So one is just following half of the crew in the west of the map, and then the other is following the crew in the east of the map. And don't get me wrong, Tower of Dawn was super interesting because you're literally going to an entire other country in this world, and you're learning so much more about magic and the fae and like the background and the history, which is extremely important. But just having to go back to read Empire of Storms is what got me through it. Fantasy wise, one of the most incredible pieces of work I've ever read. Ticked off every single box. Plot twist, badassery, romance, suspense, tremendous. Just absolutely tremendous. Kingdom of Ash, the last book in this 8-book fantasy series. It is up in my bed because I listen to this, people. I read it the night before I left for college, and I had a flight at like 5 a.m. and I finished it at like 1 in the morning. I don't think I've ever actually done one of these videos without running out of storage. Oh, and now my battery's about to die. So Kingdom of Ash. I don't think I've ever cried so hard, laughed so hard, been so happy, or so terrified in reading one book in my entire life. It was just devastating, suspenseful, breathtaking, worthy, and better than acotar. And that's how I feel about that. That was me reading the Throne of Glass series in the summer. It was incredible. I recommend it to everybody now. All the books I read in September were for school, which is disappointing. The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. So our teachers made us buy this book, read it, discuss it, and the whole entire purpose was to talk about how horrible this book is in terms of topics and themes and how the author is a horrible person. And my 5 words are going to be no, bad, sexist, racist, other options out there. So the next book I read was for the same class. It was The Tempest by William Shakespeare. Not his best work. The native of the island is named after cannibalism and is a literal troll creature. I honestly just did not like the plot. Prospero was a little interesting, but also just a horrible father in person. There's just better stuff out there. Shakespearean, magic, shipwrecked, his poor daughter, island. So for another class, I had to read Angels in America by Tony Kushner, and this was actually incredible. It's a play about the AIDS epidemic in America, and everyone needs to read it, and everyone needs to watch the version by the National Theater, which has Andrew Garfield in it. Bat crazy, shock value, remarkable, hilarious, and camp. For the same class, I had to read Joe Turner's Come and Gone by August Wilson, and this play is about a man who is looking for his wife after they got separated because of slavery. It takes place in Pittsburgh in the year 1911, and I thought it got really good towards the end because the climax happens literally on like the 3rd to last page, so it was very slow but worth it. Contemporary, unconventional plot structure, real, beautiful language, raw. Then we go ahead and we get into October. I read Woman Talking by Miriam Toews. So I originally read this for fun because I needed a really big fantasy break after reading Throne of Glass. And then I ended up using it for my midterm paper for my honors class. My camera died, but it's okay. Woman Talking, it tells the story of a theoretical meeting of a group of women who are debating whether they should stay and fight, stay and forgive these group of men, or leave this cult that they're in. It is based on a true story of a cult in Bolivia in which a bunch of women came forward after one woke up at night and realized that a large proportion of the men in the cult were drugging and assaulting all the women at night. I thought it was super interesting because it's a story about women finding their freedom and their autonomy through isolation away from the men of the cult who have been influencing their entire lives, telling them what to think, telling them what to do, and all of it is told and narrated by a man named August. I highly recommend reading this if you liked Handmaid's Tale. It's a show, male gaze, female gaze, fascinating, and absorbing. November, I read The Chalice of the Gods by Riordan. I will forever and always be a Percy Jackson girl. This book hits too hard because it is all about Percy needing to get a letter of recommendation from a god to get into college. This book talks a lot about getting older and growing up, and I did cry multiple times, and it was honestly just so good to see the trio back together. I really recommend this book, honestly. I don't care how old you are. Still jealous of the couple. Magic and sword fights. Hilarious, emotional, and relatable. So we made it to December, which is the last book I read in 2023. Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World by Benjamin Alire Sáenz. This is the second book. It was actually unplanned, but then Sáenz realized that he had a lot of more story left that he hadn't told. It started off very slow for me, which is a lot like the first book, and then it goes really fast. And Honestly, the whole thing goes by really fast because you honestly do feel like you're reading poetry. His writing is just incredible. He's one of my favorite authors. For me, this book is the effects. Like, everything that happened in the first book was the cause, the things that Adi and Dante went through, especially Adi went through, and the second book is the effect of what that happens. It's literally the causes and the effects, how he's been affected and become a better person because of it. There was a point when I was reading this book where I started crying, and I did not stop crying for the next 50 pages. So think about that. Relationships, inspiring, striking, entertaining, sad. So I read 24 books this year with a total of 10,448 pages. A lot of those were Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. I recommend all of these books except for the ones that I said that I did not recommend. Thank you so much for watching. If anybody has any books that they want me to read or recommend, please put them in the comments down below. Please tell me what you read this year. I'm always looking for new books to read. I really hope that everyone got some recommendations out of this video, and let me know if you end up reading any of these. So thank you so much for watching, and I cannot wait to do this again next year. Bye!